After watching The Education of Michelle Rhee, I was able to learn multiple things about the DC public school system during the time of Michelle Rhee. Now, when former Chancellor Michelle Rhee was in office, some of the major issues that she faced were behavioral issues within schools, low test scores amongst students, as well as lack of resources and funding. This was due to the fact that, as it showed in the video, there were lots of resources and supplies that were still held within the District of Columbia's warehouses that weren't distributed to schools, just due to the overall home state or home life of a lot of the students. They dealt with violence, they dealt with homes that were unstable. This tended to impact them within the school. Some of the students were just behind, so they were having low testing scores and just overall behavioral issues among students within multiple different schools, whether it would be absenteeism, fighting, foul language, insubordination. I know one high school in particular, Anacostia, was highlighted quite a bit for its behavioral issues. So that school in particular kind of highlighted some of the foul language, skipping class, as well as just, I guess, lack of rapport between students and faculty. It seemed like it just didn't seem like anybody really liked anybody. Students didn't like the teachers didn't like the kids. So those are some of the major issues that she faced when she took over. One of the more prominent ones that she focused a lot of her attention on, however, were testing scores and increasing those scores overall. Now, when it comes to any of Rhee's mandates in terms of if it impacted content or curriculum, I would say yes, because in the beginning of the video, it highlighted that because of these mandates, there were multiple weeks within the school year that was spent or focused towards testing. I believe it was like 2 to 3 weeks of teachers focusing their lesson plans on preparing students for testing instead of actually teaching content. So yes, her mandates did alter curriculum and content because a chunk of time within the school year was being allocated towards preparing students for their state testing, whether it be practicing drills, what have you. A lot of it, there had become an emphasis on preparing for testing in order to get good testing scores overall. Now, did those mandates improve student learning? I would say no. The reason being is that throughout the video, it highlighted that teachers felt very overwhelmed, teachers felt very pressured when it came to state testing. And even though content was being pushed, I don't know if it was being taught, if content was being taught in a way that was most authentic, that teachers were most enthusiastic about, that students probably retained a lot of the information or might have been engaged in any of the lessons that were given to them. On top of that, towards the end of the video or movie, it started to go deeper into the investigations that took place when it pertained to testing scores under Michelle Rhee's tenure time frame, and how there had been evidence or suggestive evidence that showed that tests were altered potentially. And after Rhee left, a lot of the schools that had performed really highly or were said to have had massive jumps in testing scores of students either hitting grade level or more potentially hitting grade level, just scores overall improving, those same students years later, or some of the same students years later after Rhee left, those students or the school as a whole plummeted in points, plummeted in percentages when it came to testing scores. In drastic measures. So based off of those two things, no, I don't really think it improves student learning at all. Not to mention, I feel like the stress of having teachers, the situation of having teachers who are stressed about potentially losing their job as it pertains to testing scores, I don't think that that's an type of environment that is quite conducive to learning as a whole. Because if someone who's supposed to be teaching you is stressed, then that kind of energy feeds off onto you. Also, just the space and the vibe of the environment, the space and the vibe of the classroom has just kind of been altered altogether. Not to mention, as I will say in the next point, not to mention how she handled administrators, I do not personally agree with, because even if an administrator doesn't show in one sector of their school, they may show up in other sectors of their school. For instance, that principal may not show up when it comes to testing scores, but that principal, especially when it maybe comes to behavioral issues or just overall interaction with students, might have such a presence in the building that there's an environment that fosters or facilitates excellence, because the students know, like, oh, this principal is in the building, I have to, act a certain way. Even if it means that the students may not academically perform, there are still other aspects of a principal that are beneficial or just as important. Also, when you are moving or firing or rearranging administration, that then affects the teachers because they work in tandem to an extent. And so when you alter that relationship or you alter that system, that, whether you plan on it or not, has an impact on the students as a whole, because the support system that's supposed to be given to teachers is being altered. So now the teachers are kind of left shorthanded, and there are certain things, especially when it comes to handling the education of children, that there needs to be a cohesive system around. And because of that, I do think it affected staff morale within DC public schools. Even in the video, it talked highly about that some of the teachers were expressing that they feel as though they couldn't teach in the way that they felt was needed for their students because they were so worried about potentially losing their job. And then on top of that, they're watching their superiors, their bosses, their principals, getting fired. And it kind of just feels like you're kind of under a light and you kind of can't give to your students in the way that you would want to. I don't necessarily know if it necessarily impacted student morale. I would assume that if staff morale would be affected, that student morale would be affected easier, because I think just like when you're in these rooms, in these spaces with students for prolonged periods of time, just the vibes and the energy just bounces off of each other. And with that, I do think morale, to an extent, should be considered, because when working with students, I think that especially students, like some of the students in the video who are dealing with rough home lives and rough social lives just within the city of DC, it's of no benefit to those students to have teachers or staff or faculty or administrators that have low morale, because they're already potentially coming from environments that are traumatic potentially and already probably depressing and just overall melancholy and sad. So to have students coming from depressing or sad home lives or just intense traumatic home lives to a school where the teachers and the administration are just as overwhelmed, stressed, sad, low morale, doesn't seem to benefit really anybody, because you're just going from one sad place to another sad place. Like, there's no differentiation in the energy of the vibe of where the students are going. So I think when you have a situation like that, I would think it would turn into something along the lines of, if I'm going from one sad place to another sad place, what is the point? Like, what, like, literally, actually, what do I have to look forward to, most likely? So I think it should be considered. In the video, I don't agree with how she dealt with teachers, especially in the one instance where she was trying to save summer school, so she just fired a whole bunch of people. Like, I understand the idea of efficiency, but also at the same time, like, just firing people after you told them that they have a job doesn't seem like best practices. Um, Even though you're trying to renew and fix a system, like the union representative said, there's a way of going about that by still treating people like they are people. Like, these people are still humans. They have lives. They have families, and they have to, like, take care of them. So just treating them like they are pawns, I don't necessarily agree with that. And I understand that she said that, like, she's trying to fix the system, so she doesn't really care how people feel about her. But that within itself, I think, was in poor taste of how she handled that. So I do not agree with how she treated teachers or her mentality towards staff, administrators, and teachers as a whole when it came to how she was trying to renew or fix the system. I don't think necessarily morale should be considered when it comes to teachers. Now, I don't think it is that is as important. I do believe competency is important. Morale is necessary, I believe. I don't think it's, like, super important when it comes to teacher changes. I think when it comes to teacher changes, if we're going to change teachers within the school system, that needs to be done before students are in the building. We shouldn't be changing things with kids in the building, regardless of the conversation of efficiency or best practices. That's not best practice, because if we're going to talk about children need consistency, children need routines, children need schedule. Even if that teacher is not the most competent, then maybe the best practice is literally putting them in a staff development, giving them more trainings that they have to do, more professional development that they need to be a part of, instead of just being like, nope, you're fired. Especially because, like, if you're creating an environment where not only teachers are worried about losing their jobs, but students are not going to be worried about losing their teachers at any point of the school year, that's not helpful either. If we're going to change staff, then that needs to be done before the school year starts, before children are in the room. That way, when children are in the room, these are the people that they are working with on a day-to-day basis throughout the school year. Not, I'm working with so-and-so, to then working with this new person, to potentially moving with this new person, maybe because maybe the second person isn't what I wanted, so now I need a new person. That within itself is not helpful, and highly, in my opinion, negatively impacts student learning. So even though morale can be considered, I don't think it should be of the utmost consideration when making teacher changes. I think teacher changes need to be, the thing that needs to be considered the most when making teacher changes is what time in the school year is it. Like, I understand breaks, like breaks and things like that, but throughout the school year, like when she just fired that one principal during the school year, I don't think that was necessary or wise. So overall, those are my reactions and thoughts to the video. I liked where she was coming from. I do believe that the system should be shaken up, but I agree by some of her opposers that there are ways to best go about things, and I don't think she necessarily did those, especially when it came to how she was dealing with staff and administrators within the system. It came off how she thought it would, which is very cold and just kind of, which I don't think is a solid plan for the long run. Because honestly, even though, because in the video it said that she had prepared for only having 4 years, I feel like if she went about it a different way, she would have had longer to go about it. But I think with how she treated staff, administrators, teachers, also how she interacted with community members, that I can see where she felt that she only had a limited amount of time to be within that position. So, but very insightful overall. I wasn't familiar with her. I wasn't familiar with her. So it was very insightful video and movie to look at.